Before we see a single image in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, before we know anything about the world the film is going to inhabit, we hear this. A chromatic, impenetrable cluster spanning 5 octaves, played by strings and woodwind. A swirl of dense, amorphous sound, like pure energy, completely devoid of form. This is György Ligeti's Atmosphères for large orchestra. The undifferentiated nature of the sound representing possibly the undifferentiated nature of the cosmos at the point of its conception, the Big Bang. But like the images in the film, it's difficult to conclusively say what this is telling us. But what we certainly can say is that Ligeti's music represents the unknown and the unknowable, the alien species that seems to not only be controlling the narrative of the film, but also the progression and evolution of humans. From ape to star child. But it would be a little too easy to say that Ligeti's pieces are just used to represent the supernatural elements of 2001. Music plays one of the most significant roles in the film, and every appearance and reappearance of a piece seems to have been designed to reinforce the metaphorical role that that particular piece is playing. Even the diegetic music that appears in 3 instances on the Discovery 1 has been chosen very carefully to place it in the context of all other music in the film. So each piece by Ligeti, Atmosphères, the Kyrie from his Requiem, Lux Aeterna, and Aventure, takes on its own unique role within the narrative, giving us progressively more information about the nature of the alien species. The introduction of the second piece by Ligeti, the Kyrie, slightly sharpens the image of the world that we're seeing. The piece is used 3 times in the film, always to accompany the instances when the monolith appears. This is the rectangular object created by the species that seems to be controlling human evolution. The Kyrie is clearly related to Atmosphères. Both pieces use a technique devised by Ligeti known as micropolyphony. Polyphony is where 2 or more musical lines are sung or played simultaneously, creating harmony through their overlap. Micropolyphony is where multiple melodic lines played in independent tempi and meters overlap to create a dense network of interlocking strands that when combined create a shifting, writhing texture. Harmonically, this also creates cluster chords, but cluster chords that are alive. Unlike normal polyphony, you can't hear the individual lines, but the result is something that has an internal energy that keeps the music moving. But the main distinction between Atmosphères and the Kyrie is the instrumentation. We now hear voices. The monolith always appears in the film at a point of transition, when human evolution progresses through development of technology, and the first advancement in technology is the hominid's use of tools. So it seems appropriate that as information is imparted, the score adopts a new language, one that involves words, voices, and vocalization. But this is accompanied still by dense micropolyphony in the instrumental and vocal writing. This is the undeniable mystery of the object and the cosmos. The next time we hear Ligeti's music is when Floyd is travelling to observe the second monolith, which has been buried in the moon. At the beginning of the film, we heard the purely instrumental Atmosphères, followed by the instrumental and vocal Kyrie. But now we hear a purely choral work, Ligeti's Lux Aeterna. By removing the instrumental aspects and focusing purely on the voice, it's as if we're listening directly to the consciousness of the alien species. There is still use of micropolyphony, but the texture of the music is much cleaner. It starts from a single note, an F natural, and grows outwards. The undifferentiated massive noise of the previous 2 pieces by Ligeti has become differentiated and pure, like beams of light. This seems appropriate, as the translation of the first line of text of the Lux Aeterna is "May light eternal shine upon them." The light in the case of the film is the information that the monolith is about to impart, the signal guiding them to Jupiter. The next section of the film only includes 2 uses of incidental music, Khachaturian's Adagio from his ballet Gaian, and a reoccurrence of the Atmosphère in the intermission. What Kubrick does do, though, is shift the focus to sound effects, cued by the high-pitched signal from the monolith we have just heard. This includes a deeply unsettling breathing sound from within a spacesuit that accompanies all the scenes in deep space. But the soundtrack becomes much more prevalent in the final act. The sequence of the film that begins with Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite is perhaps one of the most widely discussed, analysed and dissected pieces of cinema ever made. Is the psychedelic Stargate sequence all happening in Bowman's mind? Who has created the room that Bowman finds himself in? What is the meaning of the final shots, showing the Star Child overlooking the Earth? The visuals themselves are ambiguous, but so is the music. It begins in a way we have come to expect. As we see the third monolith, we hear Ligeti's Kyrie for the final time, but we also hear, almost in its entirety, Ligeti's Atmosphères, which begins when we see the first freeze frame on Bowman's face. This is the very first piece we heard in the film, creating a link between the beginning and the end. But importantly, the order that the pieces are played has been reversed and cycled, in the same way that the images also cycle. But what does this all mean? Is this the breaking down of order, of time, as Bowman travels through the Stargate? Are we returning to an undifferentiated state devoid of form that Atmosphere suggested at the beginning? There is clearly a link between the visual saturation on screen and the musical saturation in the score. This might mean that we are viewing on screen what the music has been telling us all along, but it's very difficult to tell. The ambiguity of meaning, though, is made even worse when we reach the penultimate scene. As Bowman arrives in the bedroom, we hear the final work of Ligeti's in the film, his choral work, Aventure. This piece, though, is completely unlike Atmosphères, the Kyrie, or his Lux Aeterna. It's a piece formed from seemingly random vocalizations, laughing, chattering, shouting. The micropolyphony of the other works is completely disappeared. Aventure feels like a work deconstructed. Unlike the other choral pieces, there is no meaning to the vocalizations, no text to interpret, so naturally it throws into question the reason why voices are used in so many other parts of the film. This is designed ambiguity. We have no real way of telling what the meaning of the visuals are, so Kubrick has chosen for the scene to be accompanied by music lacking any context. Kubrick summed this up perfectly. I intended the film to be an intensely subjective experience that reaches the viewer at an inner level of consciousness, just as music does. To explain a Beethoven symphony would be to emasculate it by erecting an artificial barrier between conception and appreciation. For the most part, it seems that every time we hear a work of Ligeti's in 2001: A Space Odyssey, it adds definition to the world. They appear to help us get slightly closer to understanding the nature of the species that is controlling the progression of humankind. But what's more interesting, perhaps, is the intentional return to ambiguity through use of a small section of Aventure, a piece that raises way more questions than it answers. And I suppose that is the point. The surrealist, abstract finale makes you re-evaluate the meaning of every aspect of the film, and the questions that it forces you to ask ultimately throw into light the way that we think about human societies and communities, the integration of technology into our lives, and most significantly, our place and future in the universe. When doing my research for this essay, I found an astonishing theory by David Patterson in his essay Music, Structure and Metaphor in 2001: A Space Odyssey. He theorised that the opening notes of all of the tonal music, combined with the diegetic music heard in the film, creates, with some transposition, a harmonic series based on a C. I put a link to the article in the description below if you'd like to find out more. And if you like this essay and other Kubrick films, then do take a look at my analysis of the Shining soundtrack, linked here. See you next time.